The next part of this story is in more recent times.
La siguiente parte de la historia es en tiempos más recientes.
I was asked, and again, different spiritual people, including you, will be asked to do things.
Me fue pedido, y bueno, nuevamente les digo que muchas personas en el mundo, incluso pueden ser ustedes, se les va a pedir algo así.
I was asked to do certain things for three specific Indian tribes in the world.
Se me pidió que hiciera algo para 3 tribus específicas en el mundo.
And that I was to collect a small group of people to go do these ceremonies.
Y tenía que reunir a un pequeño grupo de personas para hacer estas ceremonias.
The first one was for the Anasazi,
La primera fue para los Anasazi,
which are the ancient ones from the Four Corner region of the United States.
que son los más antiguos de las 4 rincones de Estados Unidos.
And the second one was the Mayans from here in Belize and Guatemala.
El segundo fue para los mayas aquí en Belice y Guatemala.
The third one was for the Incas and for many groups that were even before them.
El tercero fue para los incas y para algunos grupos que incluso fueron anteriores a ellos.
These tribes long ago had certain problems.
Estas tribus tuvieron algunos problemas hace algún tiempo.
And so in all 3 cases, one of the things we were to do was to open a vortex because between the earth, the inner earth and the outer earth, because in all these tribes, as they came from the other worlds, I guess I have to explain something first.
Bueno, lo que tenía que hacerse era abrir un vórtice que conectara la tierra externa con la tierra interna, pero creo que antes tengo que contarles otra historia.
Almost universally throughout the world, the indigenous people believe that there were worlds before this one on Earth.
Casi todos los pueblos indígenas del mundo creen que hubo otras tierras, otros lugares antes que este.
The Hopi and almost all the North American ones believe that we're now in the 4th world.
Y los Hopis y varias tribus norteamericanas creen que ahora estamos en el 4º mundo.
And what the Hopi call is the day of purification. We will move from the 4th world to the 5th world.
Y en el día que los Hopi llaman el mundo de la purificación, nos vamos a mover del 4º al 5º mundo.
And like the Kogi believe ultimately there are 9 worlds.
Los Kogi creen que finalmente hay 9 mundos en Colombia.
But when what my grandfathers were telling me was that when we came from the 3rd world to the 4th world,
los abuelos mayas me decían que cuando pasamos del 3º al 4º mundo,
sitting there, and they were describing all this to me.
Yo estaba ahí sentado y me lo estaban describiendo.
The world, the 3rd world looked really just like this.
El tercer mundo realmente se veía muy parecido a esto.
And toward the end of the 3rd world, it became very much like this. It became polluted. The skies, the water, the air, everything started becoming polluted and dirty.
Al final de este tercer mundo, todo estaba más o menos como aquí, todo estaba contaminado, sucio.
Integrity began to break down, and the morals began to break down, and all these kind of things began to happen.
La moralidad y la integridad comenzaron a romperse y pasaron cosas similares.
And so, and this is straight from my tribe, and I'm going to give directly what they said.
Esto viene directo de mi tribu y les voy a decir exactamente lo que me dijeron.
The good people, supposedly, is how they talked about it then, and this is probably going to change this time, but they were very polarized, and they saw all the people that were causing all these problems as separate from them.
Las personas buenas, esta era la forma como ellos lo veían, porque todavía estaban muy polarizados y había las personas que hacían todas estas cosas incorrectas y las veían como separados de ellos.
And so the people who wished for the world not to be that way, not to be polluted, and for there to be war and all these things, they got together and discussed how they wanted to leave, and they discussed how could they leave.
Las personas que no estaban de acuerdo con esta contaminación y todas estas cosas que estaban pasando se reunieron para decidir cómo era que se podían ir, porque ya se querían ir.
And there were certain ETs that visited them all the time.
Y había ciertos extraterrestres que los visitaban todo el tiempo,
Just as they do now.
exacto como lo hacen
Almost
ahora.
every tribe has ETs that visit them all the time.
Casi todas las tribus tienen estos extraterrestres que los visitan todo
I
el
was just
tiempo.
with Credo Mutwa of the Zulu tribe. They have seven ET tribes that visit them all the time.
La tribu Zulu tiene como 7 razas de extraterrestres que los visitan todo el
He's
tiempo.
showing me pictures of them and all this stuff.
Me han mostrado incluso fotografías y todo.
And one of these tribes, one of these ETs, they called Mr. Mole.
Uno de
You
estos,
know, like a mole, a little animal that digs in the ground, M-O-L-E.
Topo, a uno de estos itis lo llamaban el señor Topo.
And he was just a little guy.
Era un hombre pequeño
Would come down and visit them.
que los visitaba.
We have little tiny ETs that visit us too, by the way.
Nosotros también tenemos ETs muy pequeños que nos visitan, por cierto,
Like the Arcturians, for example.
como los acturianos, por ejemplo.
Their spaceships are only about this big around.
Sus naves son más o
Little
menos
tiny
como de
people.
este tamaño y son personas así de pequeñas.
And Mr. Mole, they decided that Mr. Mole, they went and talked with Mr. Mole, and he told them that he could show them how to go into another world.
Ellos decidieron hablar con el señor Topo y él les dijo que él podía enseñarles cómo irse a otro mundo.
So all this people that wanted to leave lay down he told them to lay down on the ground and look at the stars.
Y él les dijo a todas estas personas que se querían ir que se acostaran en la tierra y vieran el cielo.
And he says, if you look at the stars just right, in a certain kind of way, you realize that they're not way far away, they're really, really close.
Y él les dijo, si ustedes observan las estrellas de la forma correcta, se van a dar cuenta de que en realidad no están tan lejos, sino que están mucho, muy cerca.
And that it's not space, but it's solid.
Y que en realidad no es espacio, sino que es algo sólido.
And so Mr. Mole started digging through the sky.
Y entonces el señor Topo lo que empezó a hacer es excavar a través del cielo.
And started going, literally making a hole, and the sky became like earth.
Y entonces empezó a hacer un hoyo y el cielo se convirtió como la tierra.
And so he started digging up, and the people followed behind him, and they used little baskets.
Y la gente empezó a seguirlo a través de este hoyo y ellos usaban unas pequeñas canastas.
And they would pass the dirt down and drop it. So as they started passing through the earth sky, it became like a bubble moving through the earth.
Entonces con estas canastas ellos removían la tierra y al ir pasando a través de este lugar se convirtió como en una especie de burbuja.
And eventually they came out, they broke the surface into the fourth world.
Y finalmente ellos salieron a la superficie del cuarto mundo.
And when they came out, the sky, the light was so bright they were all blinded. They couldn't see anything. It was just
Cuando
so bright.
salieron a ese lugar, la luz era tan brillante que los cegó, no podían ver nada.
And it took them a long time to be able to see.
Les tomó mucho tiempo ser capaces de ver.
And when they finally did, they looked back on the surface of the earth where they had just come out of, and it was like a cone-shaped hole.
Y entonces, cuando ellos pudieron ver, observaron la tierra que habían dejado y se dieron cuenta que tenía la forma de un cono,
which they call a sipapu.
que ellos llaman un sipapu.
And it's the opening that they came out of from the other world.
Que es la apertura a través de la cual llegaron al otro mundo.
And they were met there by Mrs. Spider,
Y ahí se encontraron con la señora Araña,
which was a black widow.
que era una viuda negra.
And she gave them the initial instructions. Now, this is the Pueblo, and other tribes have similar ideas about this.
Esta es la de una tribu, en otras tienen ideas similares, pero lo que ella hizo fue darles las instrucciones.
She told them not to go, that the white mountain in front of them to the north was their limits.
Les dijo que no podían pasar las montañas blancas que estaban al norte, que esos eran sus límites.
The gold mountain to the south, they
La
were not to go
montaña.
beyond that.
La montaña dorada en el sur tampoco podían pasar más allá de ahí.
Black mountains to the west, they were not to pass those.
Las montañas negras del oeste no las podían pasar.
And the white mountains to the east would become red with their blood if they passed those.
Y que las montañas blancas del este se volverían rojas con su sangre si trataban cruzarlas.
And to find the area of the Pueblo nations
Y tenían que encontrar el área de las naciones del pueblo,
in New Mexico.
en Nuevo México.
And the story continues on for a long time. They met Mr. Turtle, who on the back of the turtle was exactly how all the pueblos were to be laid out.
Y también se encontraron con el señor Tortuga, y en la concha del señor Tortuga estaba escrito el tiempo que iban a durar estos
And
pueblos.
it's a long story, really, that would take another 45 minutes or so to tell. The
Es
whole
una
story.
larga historia que tomaría como 45 minutos contar.
But regardless of how
Y los Zulus dicen que ellos provienen de fuera de la tierra y que llegaron en sus merkabas y utilizan esa palabra.
this is why Credo Mutwa was so interested in talking with me and everything, because he found it fascinating that we would even know about the Merkaba. He thought that was their information.
Esta persona, can you repeat the name?
Credo Mutwa.
Credo Murwa, estaba por eso tan interesado en hablar con Drunvalo, porque él creía que este conocimiento les pertenecía a ellos.
I may see him again. He's just a little north of South Africa.
Él está al norte de Sudáfrica y probablemente lo vuelva a ver.
And so the basic thing here is that some of these tribes have left people in the other worlds.
Lo importante de esto es que algunas tribus dejaron gente en los otros mundos.
This is definitely true with the Mayans and the Aztecs and some of the other ones, and the Incas, and a lot of them. Part of their spirit is inside the earth still.
Esto es cierto para los mayas, los incas, los aztecas. Ellos saben que parte de su espíritu se quedó dentro de la tierra.
With the Anasazi, they not only left their spirit inside the earth, partly, but when they came back out into the fourth world, they were forced, some of them were forced back into the earth.
Para los Anasazi también está claro que parte de su espíritu se quedó dentro de la tierra, pero también cuando salieron al cuarto mundo, algunos de ellos fueron forzados a volver a regresar dentro de la tierra.
They had so many forces trying to kill them, environmental forces, because there was no rain.
Había muchas fuerzas tratando de matarlos, como fuerzas ambientales, porque no había lluvia
For 47 years,
durante 47 años,
and the conquistadors were coming in, and they were trying to kill them.
y los conquistadores estaban llegando y querían matarlos.
That they decided to go back into the Sipapus and to go back into the third world, which was a huge mistake.
Y entonces por eso ellos decidieron regresar a los Sipapus, al tercer mundo, y esto fue un error muy grande.
And a lot of these ancient tribes This is something that isn't realized. Even though they made amazing things with their structures and alignment to the stars, and the knowledge that was presented were incredible.
Y muchas de estas tribus, aunque todo lo que hicieron, las construcciones que hicieron, las alineaciones que tenían, realmente era algo increíble,
They seldom lived past 19 or 20 years old.
no vivían más de 19 o 20 años.
They started having children at 11 or 12,
Empezaban a tener hijos a los 11 o 12,
and by the time they were 19 or 20, that was the end of their life.
a los 19 o 20 se terminaba su vida,
And if they lived to be 25, they were an old person.
y si llegaban a los 25 eran personas viejas.
And the leaders that we met in those worlds were, one was 35, and the other one was about 45, and the one that was 45 was looked at like God. He was so old.
Y uno, por ejemplo, de los líderes tenía 35 y otro 45, y el de 45 realmente lo veían como el Dios.
And so we were being asked to create special medicine wheels that would link the inner worlds to the outer worlds so that they could come out and be with us. This was one of the primary, in order to get permission from these different tribes, this was part of their request.
Parte de los requisitos que se necesitaban para obtener permiso de estas tribus era justamente con esas ruedas medicinales crear esa apertura que conectara los mundos internos con los externos para que toda esa gente que estaba en esos mundos pudiera reunirse con los que estaban en el otro.
So the story is going to primarily focus on the third one, which is in Peru, but
La historia se va a enfocar principalmente en el tercer grupo que está en Perú
Peru and Bolivia.
y Bolivia.
But I'll just touch upon the other two for a moment.
Pero también voy a tocar un poco acerca de los otros dos.
The things that happened in there, because each one of these different groups that were formed were very few Americans. It was people from everywhere.
De estos grupos que se formaron, había muy pocos norteamericanos, había gente de todas partes,
Every race, every color, all over the world.
de cada raza y color en todo el mundo.
And this was a prediction, as we have now been told.
Esto ya era una predicción como ahora se nos ha dicho.
Not a prediction that I knew, but a prediction that we were told.
No era una predicción que yo conociera, pero es una que nos habían dicho.
And I don't even know where to start with it, the first one, but there were things that happened there that just the way the things moved and how we met, the various indigenous tribes that came up that knew from their prophecies that this was taking place. And
Todo lo que sucedió, no sé ni cómo explicarlo, pero todos esos encuentros con estas tribus que de alguna manera sabían lo que nosotros íbamos a hacer.
and how they treated us was just incredible.
Y la forma como nos trataron fue increíble.
The Navajo does not like white man very much.
Los navajo no aprecian mucho a los hombres blancos,
At all.
en absoluto.
They wish we were just gone.
Ellos desearían que nos hubiéramos ido.
And they're not very friendly, really, toward us.
No son realmente muy amistosos hacia
And-
nosotros.
But so we had to go through Navajo land and to some of their but really sacred places. I mean, really sacred places.
Y tuvimos que ir hacia tierras navajas y teníamos que entrar hacia lugares realmente muy sagrados.
And with me knowing how they feel about this, I'm going, well, this has got to be a blessing from God because this isn't going to happen.
Y yo, conociendo cómo se sienten respecto a nosotros, entendí que esta tendría que ser una bendición de Dios, porque
We
conocía.
started a canyon de Shea, which is this just absolutely beautiful river that's way down inside the earth. And these mountains and that sacred land is down in there.
Empezamos en un cañón que tiene un río que está muy, muy cerca de la tierra, que es muy hermoso.
Tourists are allowed to go there and look from little lookout places and look in there, but they're, you know,
Los turistas solo tienen permitido asomarse desde arriba y ver hacia abajo del cañón.
we arrived at the first place, and these Navajo elders came up and they just put their arms around us and just opened their hearts to us. I mean, it was just like, holy mackerel, this is incredible.
Y cuando nosotros llegamos al primer lugar, los ancianos navajos se acercaron a nosotros, nos extendieron los brazos y realmente se abrieron, era algo que no esperaba.
And they said, come with us, and they took us down inside.
Nos dijeron, vengan con nosotros, y nos bajaron.
Walking through areas where there are petroglyphs on the walls every 50, 60 feet. Ancient petroglyphs all over the walls.
Y nos llevaron a un lugar en donde hay petroglifos muy antiguos cada 50 pies.
Walking right through the rivers, through
Caminando.
mud, mosquitoes, everything else.
A través de los ríos con mosquitos y todo eso.
And telling us all their ancient history and stories.
Y nos contaban todas sus historias y cuentos antiguos.
And I'm just watching this and I'm going, this is, there's something going on here more than one could make up by just making a trip.
Y bueno, yo sabía que ahí estaba sucediendo algo más de lo que alguien simplemente pueda pensar.
Everywhere we went, the doors were opened.
A cualquier lugar a donde fuimos se abrían las puertas.
And we were brought into sacred places that many of these places white man's never been brought to before.
Y fuimos llevados a lugares sagrados en donde jamás un hombre blanco había estado.
And then at any rate, it's a long story, and I can't go into all the things that happened there because it's not pertinent to what I want to get to. But
Es una larga historia y realmente no es pertinente con respecto al lugar a donde quiero llegar.
I left there with a deep change took place in me.
Yo salí de ahí con un verdadero cambio dentro.
I mean, we did a medicine wheel in Colorado, which was on the northernmost part of the Anasazi world.
Hicimos una ceremonia en Colorado que era en la parte más norte de la región
To
Anasazi.
open it up, and all the people, and a lot of them were, they're like you at various stages of development, and everybody saw this. The Anasazi from inside came right out of the ground, right into the air. It was amazing, and began taking our hands and dancing with us. And we were dancing around this whole thing. I mean, you could see them. It was just like, jeez.
Lo que sucedió en ese lugar, había personas de todo tipo de niveles como ustedes, y lo que sucedió es que todo el mundo sin excepción vio cómo los Anasazi surgieron desde abajo de la tierra, se plantaron sobre la superficie y todo el mundo los veía, y luego tomaron nuestras manos y empezaron a bailar con nosotros. Fue algo realmente asombroso.
So I'm going to just cut that one short, and
Voy a mantener esto
then
corto.
a few months later, or maybe it was a year later, I don't even know when it was. I can't
No sé si fue unos meses o un año después.
As I get older, it doesn't seem to matter.
Conforme envejezco ya parece no importar.
We went to the Mayans invited us to do ceremony with them.
Los mayas nos invitaron a hacer una ceremonia con ellos.
And it was Huns Batsman was the one that invited us, but there were others. There were two or three of the Mayan grandmother elders.
Husbansan nos invitó, pero había 2 o 3 más ancianos de las regiones mayas.
As soon as we
La
arrived,
abuela.
as soon as we arrived, they came and they wanted us to know that we had permission to do what we were doing.
Y en cuanto llegamos se nos acercaron y lo que nos dijeron es que teníamos el permiso para hacer lo que íbamos a hacer.
And the movement again began to work in the same kind of way that was just, you couldn't possibly either make this happen or control it.
El
You
movimiento
couldn't
que
do
se
it.
dio
It's not
fue
possible.
exactamente como antes, era un movimiento que de ninguna manera podías generar y mucho menos controlar.
And I'm just going to give a few little highlights to this.
Y voy a hablar de algunos puntos especiales.
There are 4 different people in this room. One of them, right as we began the trip, can never remember the name of this temple.
Justo cuando empezamos el viaje, nunca puedo recordar el nombre de este templo.
Between Chichen Itza and Merida,
Entre Chichen Itza y Mérida.
It's that one temple that has a big open thing, and the sun every spring comes right through the. What is it? Yes. How do you say that? Oh God, I still can't say
Ni
it.
siquiera yo sé cómo se llama.
It's like an incomprehensible word for me. But you know where I'm talking about, right? Yeah. Okay.
Es un templo que tiene una abertura y entonces en la primavera el sol atraviesa esa apertura.
Hun Batsman wanted us to do ceremony at this temple.
Husbansan quería que hiciéramos Husbansman quería que hiciéramos una ceremonia en este templo.
Yeah, H-U-N.
Ah, yes.
Well, that's close enough.
Civil
It's
Chaltun.
H-U-N and then it's M-E-N.
Yes, Batsman.
Yeah. It's,
Civil Chaltun.
this is an N and that's an E.
Means one. Bats is the beginning of the, like, something like the Alpha and Omega.
Yeah.
It's a mono, it's a monkey.
A monkey.
Yeah. Kun is first monkey.
Okay.
Kun bats. Kun batsman.
Okay. Well, while I was at that temple, because I still can't say it,
Estaba en ese templo que todavía no puedo pronunciar.
whose Batsman had set it up where we're going to do we're waiting for the sunrise for this to see, because what it does, it lines up in the doorway and you know when it is, and then there's a cenote right near there that we were going to do ceremony at.
Entonces Humbatsman dijo que teníamos que esperar cierta hora del día en que el sol atravesara esa ventana, saliera y atravesara esa ventana, y entonces había un cenote en la parte de atrás.
So I'm sitting there watching the sun is getting lighter and lighter and lighter, and it's just ready to come up, and I know it's going to happen just any second.
Entonces estaba yo ahí sentado viendo cómo el sol comenzaba a salir y a hacerse más brillante, a subir, 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 y yo sabía que iba a pasar en algún momento ya cercano, en un segundo.
And this old man hands this Mayan crystal skull to me and says, "Take this and put it to your forehead."
Y entonces un hombre me entrega uno de estos cráneos mayas de cristal y me dijo, sosténlo y ponlo en tu tercer ojo.
It's a crystal skull about so big.
Un cráneo de cristal como de este tamaño.
And I look at this.
Lo miro.
I don't know anything about the history of these.
Yo no tengo idea de la historia de esto.
And I put it to my head, and at the exact moment, the sun breaks the thing and starts going into the doorway.
Y lo pongo en mi cabeza justo en el momento en el que el sol cruzaba ese espacio.
So I'm holding it here, and the light goes through.
Entonces lo estoy sosteniendo aquí y la luz atraviesa.
And within the 1 minute or so that light was in there, I understood so much.
Y en ese minuto que la luz estuvo en esa posición, yo entendí tanto.
There was 3 spirits in this crystal.
In this what?
3 living spirits inside this crystal.
Había 3 espíritus vivos dentro de este cristal.
It was a young male and a young female, and they were facing each other and they were making love.
Había un hombre y una mujer jóvenes que estaban de frente y estaban haciendo el amor.
And way in the background, very quietly, was a grandmother sitting on the ground.
Y más atrás, sentada muy quieta, estaba una abuela.
And the grandmother was the one who had the crystal skull created.
Y la abuela fue la que hizo que se creara este cristal.
And the male and the female were the ones that had gone through the training of the Mayan school.
Y este hombre y esta mujer eran los que habían atravesado el entrenamiento de la escuela maya.
And they held within them all the living knowledge of the Mayan people
Y ellos sostenían dentro de ellos todas las tradiciones o sabiduría maya
at the time that this crystal skull had been created.
en el momento en que fue creado este cristal.
And they had ingested certain herbs and certain plants,
Y ellos habían ingerido ciertas hierbas y plantas
which they had been trained for,
para los que fueron entrenados,
so that when they did it just right, they died and they consciously went into those crystals.
para que si lo hacían correctamente, ellos murieran y pudieran entrar en estos cristales,
To live there
para vivir ahí,
until a time long in the future when that crystal and many other ones would come together in ceremony, and all the knowledge of all the different eras of the Mayan crystals span a whole long time of different eras would all come back together, and all the memories and all the knowledge and all the wisdom of the Mayans would be brought back together.
hasta un momento muy lejano en el tiempo en donde se hiciera una ceremonia en donde se reunieran todos los cristales de este tipo, que entonces iban a revelar todo el conocimiento, la sabiduría y de todas las eras de la etapa maya.
And then it just wouldn't stop. Everywhere I'd go, people would come out of the jungle, hand me another crystal skull. It was a lot of them. I don't even know how many there were.
Y entonces esto comenzó a suceder en todas partes. A cualquier lugar de la jungla donde iba llegaban personas que me entregaban estos cráneos de cristal.
Sometimes they were females, sometimes they were males.
Algunas
holding
veces
different
eran hombres,
kinds
otras
of-
mujeres.
Different periods of time.
Y estos eran de diferentes periodos de tiempo.
We then went to Chichen Itza. No, excuse me. Yeah, we did. We went to Chichen Itza. We had to do ceremony there on I think it was the spring equinox, I'm pretty sure.
De ahí fuimos a Chichen Itza y hicimos una ceremonia, me parece que fue en el equinoccio de primavera.
And from the story I told a long time ago about the first cenote, that was the reason why Chichen Itza was there. I always knew that there was a second cenote. That was the reason. There was two. And
De una historia que antes contaba en donde se habla de que la razón para la que Chichen Itza esté ahí es por un cenote. Yo sabía que ahí tenía que haber otro cenote.
these cenotes are important because they're openings into the inner worlds, into the other worlds from which they came.
Y estos cenotes son importantes porque son la abertura hacia estos mundos desde donde ellos provinieron.
These are sacred openings.
Son aperturas sagradas.
And Hun's Batsman was bringing in 200 and something different tribes, I believe it was, to do ceremony.
Humbatsman estaba reuniendo, me parece que como a 200 tribus para hacer esta ceremonia.
And invited us to be part of this.
Y nos invitó a ser parte de esto.
But other energies were involved.
Pero estaban involucradas otras energías.
Energies that no matter how good of a shaman you are, you can't anticipate everything.
Otras energías que sin importar qué tan buen chamán seas, no puedes anticipar.
And so we were lined up, and there were lots of other groups and people and things that were waiting for them to come in.
Estábamos ahí, había muchos grupos de otro tipo de personas que estaban esperando
And there was
también.
a certain area in front of the castle pyramid where Hun's Batsman and this huge group of elders were to do their ceremony.
Y estaban enfrente del palacio principal, Humbatsman y varios de los ancianos esperando hacer la ceremonia.
But these other forces began to block things.
Pero estas otras fuerzas comenzaron a bloquear las cosas.
And so we were waiting for hours.
Así que estuvimos
Hours
esperando
and
durante horas y horas y horas.
I don't even remember how long it was. It was a long time.
No me acuerdo ni siquiera cuánto fue, pero fue mucho tiempo.
And finally, each one of the temples, the Mayans have assigned certain Mayan people to be the keepers of those temples.
Los mayas han asignado a ciertas personas para que sean los guardianes de cada templo maya.
And the priest and priestess, you might say, of the Uxmal temple.
El sacerdote y la sacerdotisa del templo de Uxmal.
They're not very old. You met them, like 30 or something like that? Really young. They came up, beautiful lights. They were just brilliant, just beautiful lights. And they came up and they knew, even though before it happened, that the energies had to change or the ceremony that was predicted by the Mayans was not going to take place.
Ellos eran jóvenes como de 30 años y surgieron unas luces muy hermosas y ellos sabían que tenía que suceder algo porque si no, no se iba a poder hacer esta ceremonia que ya estaba pactada por los mayas.
They went to the Incas and they went to us. They went to some of the tribes that were from South America and various ones and said, come with me.
Y ellos nos llamaron a mí y a otros incas y a otras de las personas que estaban ahí y dijeron, vengan con nosotros.
And they took us off into the side into a jungle area.
Y nos llevaron hacia un lado a un área de jungla.
And put the cloth down and began to make the four corners and directions and began to set up for the ceremony that was needed to take place.
Y entonces pusieron una especie como de mantel, marcaron las 4 direcciones y empezaron a hacer todo para la ceremonia que tenía que llevarse a cabo.
Meanwhile,
Mientras tanto,
Huntsbatsman and the 200 and something elders were being held up by the police.
Humbatsmen y como 200 ancianos más de las tribus fueron detenidos por la policía.
Being blocked.
Estaban siendo bloqueados.
And finally, they finally got in, but they got in very, very, very late.
Who?
They finally made it into the ceremonial spot.
Finalmente llegaron al lugar
Very,
donde iba a
very
ser
late.
la ceremonia, pero llegaron muy tarde.
No, Huntsbatsman's telling me this later.
Humbatsman me dijo esto más tarde.
And Huntsbatsman was not the elder of these elders. There was someone that was more elder than he was, and so that elder took control of the group.
Humbatsman no era el más anciano de este grupo de ancianos, sino que el más grande fue el que tomó el control de la
And it
situación.
was someone from South America that didn't understand the Mexican police.
Era alguien de Sudamérica que no entendía a la policía mexicana.
And so when they got there, he wanted to start a fire to begin, which is natural.
Cuando él llegó, lo que quería hacer era prender fuego, que es lo natural.
Huntsbatsman said, no, we can't do that. And he says, we will do that. And they started this fire, and the police came in with fire extinguishers, put it all out, and arrested everybody, all the major elders.
Entonces el anciano dijo, sí, lo tenemos que hacer, tenemos que prenderlo, aunque Humbatsman dijo que no. Entonces lo prendieron y fue en ese momento cuando llegó la policía con los extinguidores y los detuvo a todos.
And actually put them in jail.
Y de hecho los pusieron en la cárcel.
And so the whole ceremony was just broken apart.
Entonces toda la ceremonia se interrumpió.
Well, Huntsbatsman saw it all coming.
Humbatsman ya lo veía venir.
So he moved away
Así que él
before
se
it all
fue
came down.
antes de que llegaran todos los policías.
But then he said, I can feel the ceremony.
¿Ay, qué what?
I can feel the ceremony.
Pero entonces dijo, yo puedo sentir la ceremonia.
And so he kept moving until he found us in the jungle.
Hasta que percibiendo nos encontró en la jungla.
And as we were doing the ceremony, he was walking around the outside, circling the ceremony.
Y conforme nosotros hacíamos la ceremonia, él estuvo caminando en círculos alrededor de la ceremonia,
Completing the words that had to be said.
completando las palabras que tenían que decirse.
While he was doing that, but I didn't know he was doing that,
Él lo estaba haciendo, pero yo no sabía que lo hacía.
it's a little thing. The priestess asked me to come into the center, and she asked me to come over to the blanket.
Entonces la sacerdotisa me llamó al centro y me dijo que me pusiera en este mantel.
There were two blankets, one on top of the other one.
Había dos, un mantel encima de otro.
And she says, feel or see inside here. She opens it up, and there are 13 crystal skulls inside there.
Y entonces me dijo, siente o ve a través de esto. Entonces lo levanta tantito y yo vi 13 cristales de cráneo.
And so the ceremony was performed by two very young Mayans that basically
Entonces la ceremonia realmente fue hecha por dos mayas muy jóvenes
saved the prophecies.
que prácticamente salvaron las profecías.
Do you have anything to add to that or anything?
¿Tienes algo que agregar a esto?
Okay. Now, there's only one more thing I want to say, because I'm saying these, I usually don't say these things I'm saying right now, but I'm doing it because there's different people in this room that need to know this.
Yo casi nunca hablo de esto, pero hay algunas personas en este salón que necesitan saberlo.
It's important to know that the ideas that the Mayan people sacrificed each other and a lot of things that they did was something that they always did.
Algo que es importante es saber que el hecho de que los mayas sacrificaran personas y todo este tipo de cosas no es verdad.
They were a very loving, beautiful, heart people.
Ellos eran unas personas amorosas, hermosas y personas del corazón.
But toward the end of their, the ancient way, they were taken over by another energy.
Pero al final de estos tiempos antiguos, ellos fueron tomados por otro tipo de energía.
And it was this energy, it was like an entity, and it went into many, many, many of the Mayan people.
Y esta energía, que era como una entidad, se metió en muchos de estos mayas.
This woman had been on every one of these things. She just keeps going on every one of them.
Esta mujer estuvo en todas estas cosas.
But it became clear to me that we could not continue doing this, and neither could Huntsbatsman with all this interference and what was going on.
Lo que sí tenía muy claro es que ni nosotros ni Humbatsmen podían realizar todo lo que se tenía que hacer sin antes hacer esto.
That this woman somehow held an energy that was connected to this Mayan land.
Esta mujer de alguna forma tenía una energía que estaba conectada con esta tierra maya.
Until this was, you know, I mean, the last thing I wanted to do was work with the kind of thing, you know, with entities, but there was an entity in her that it had to go. And otherwise,
yo no quería hacer esto de quitar entidades y eso, pero había una entidad dentro de ella que definitivamente se tenía que ir.
Otherwise, the whole purpose of why we were there would be subverted.
De otra forma, el propósito de lo que nosotros teníamos que hacer ahí no se hubiera logrado.
But we couldn't figure out how to do it, because if we were in a hotel room or someone, she might scream and have hotel people and police coming and all that stuff.
Pero no sabíamos cómo hacerlo, porque aunque estuviéramos en un hotel, en un salón, de repente ella se ponía a gritar como loca y entonces llegaba gente a ver qué era lo que estaba pasando y...
So we go, how are we going to do this? And so we figured out we had a van, a car, a big van, and we figured we'd go as far away from people as possible. So we went way out in a parking lot, and then way out in a remote area of the parking lot, and then we put her inside the van and closed the doors and windows.
Lo que hicimos, porque sabíamos que teníamos que estar lo más alejados de la gente posible, es que teníamos una camioneta. Entonces las subimos en la camioneta y nos fuimos al lugar más lejano del estacionamiento, que ya estaba lejos. La metimos en la camioneta y cerramos puertas y ventanas.
And then put guards outside.
Y pusimos guardias afuera.
So if anybody starts coming this way, they kind of steer them away from it.
Para que si alguien venía, le dijeran que se fuera para otro lado.
Then we put guards inside.
Y pusimos guardias adentro.
Because I knew from the very beginning that whatever this was not anything normal.
Porque yo supe desde el principio que lo que sea que esto haya sido no era normal.
And as I first went in, I made connection with this thing, and then I began to realize this energy was not just in her, but it was in lots of Mayan people, It was in the trees, it was in the dirt, it was ancient. It had been with the Mayan people toward the end of the ancient civilization. I mean,
Yo me
they have not
conecté
ended
con
their story.
esta energía y me di cuenta que no solo estaba dentro de esta mujer, sino que estaba dentro de muchos mayas. Y no solo eso, estaba en los árboles, estaba en la tierra. Es una energía muy antigua que estaba con ellos desde el final de los tiempos antiguos.
And to truly help the Mayan people and for them to do what they have to do in the future, this had to be solved.
Y para poder ayudar a la gente maya y que pudieran hacer lo que tenían que hacer, se tenía que resolver esto.
And this thing had two parts to it, and it was black, and it was huge.
Esta cosa tenía como dos partes y era negra y era muy grande.
And I communicated with it, and it wasn't very communicatable.
Yo me quise comunicar y no era como que muy comunicativo.
But finally got through to it, and I had to use a little force.
Finalmente se comunicó y tuve que usar un poco de fuerza
I've never done before and I've never done since.
y que nunca había, es algo que nunca había hecho antes y que no he hecho después.
It basically had to be forcefully worked with.
Definitivamente tenía que usar la fuerza para trabajar con esto.
And it didn't want to go, it did not want to go, and finally we got it where it was starting to go, and right at the moment it started to go, it was so much energy that something happened there that I've never seen before or since. Now, you've probably never seen anything like it either. Were you there?
Yes, I was there.
You saw what I'm saying?
Conchita estaba dentro de la
Backs up,
camioneta.
yeah, I remember I was there.
Y es algo, lo que sucedió fue algo que verdaderamente yo nunca había visto antes. La energía comenzó a salir un poco, pero justo cuando había salido,
As it was coming out, there was so much energy that about 100 feet on, she was facing this way, her body, and there was a plane of energy this way, and it was on about 100 feet on either side of her body. There were these trees. One of them was right on the edge of the parking lot, and these trees were about this big around, and what were they? What kind of trees were they? I don't know which kind of tree, but yeah, there was there was an area about 10 feet around on either side that just the energy started going like this, and the trees just started shaking on either side.
lo que sucedió es cuando esta energía comenzó a salir,
This
la
is
mujer
right-
estaba viendo para allá y como que había una línea de energía para acá.
This
Y
is-
como a 10 pies de ahí, todos los árboles que estaban alrededor comenzaron a sacudirse,
And
porque era muchísima la
I'm
energía.
pulling this out, and Archangel Michael's getting this thing, and we're pulling it out, and right when we pull it out, it was like an explosion. The trees on this side these over here, they look like they're going to break, and the one on this side over here, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them, they just broke off and fell over this car. Just smashed up this little Volkswagen.
Estaba yo sacando esta energía junto con el arcángel Miguel, y en el momento de sacarla era tan fuerte esta energía que muchos de los árboles que estaban alrededor empezaron a romperse, y un árbol que estaba de este lado se rompió y se cayó encima de un
I
coche.
remember when I got out of the car, the guardians outside, their eyes were like that big.
Cuando salimos de la camioneta, los que habíamos puesto de guardias afuera estaban con los ojos de este tamaño.
So you were there too? That was
Michiko estaba afuera. Michiko was outside the van.
when that thing left, it sucked all this black negative energy out of all over Yucatan and Belize and all over. It was pulling out of people. It was a huge, huge blessing.
Esta
Huge.
energía, en el momento que salió, como que agarró toda la energía negativa que estaba dentro de todas las personas en toda la península de Yucatán y Belice, y fue una verdadera bendición porque se llevó todo eso.
And it's gone. It'll never be back here ever.
Ya se fue y nunca más va a volver a
Not
regresar.
ever again.
Nunca más.
And may the Mayan people never encounter anything like that again. Or if they do, may they be strong enough to.
Y ojalá que los mayas jamás se encuentren con una situación igual, y si la encuentran, ojalá sean lo suficientemente fuertes.
And so I'm going to leave this part now and go to the ceremonies in Peru that are pertinent to us as a group.
voy a salirme de esto y me voy a ir hacia las ceremonias que se realizaron en Perú, que son las pertinentes para este grupo.
But when I was at the Chichen Itza, the Inca, one of the Inca priests, I think there were two of them, came up and they asked for a meeting, and we had a meeting, and he told me that he wanted me to come to Peru, and that he gave me permission to go there, and that he thought that he could. He had to first further communicate with his grandfather that was down there.
Cuando estaba en Chichen Itza había dos sacerdotes incas y ellos me dijeron que quería que fuera yo a Perú y me dieron el permiso para estar ahí.
So there were telephone calls and talks and things that went on around all of this, and finally it was decided that we would make the next trip into Peru.
Entonces se hicieron llamadas telefónicas, se hicieron arreglos y de todo para poder planear este viaje y hacer lo que seguía en Perú.
And there were only 3 ceremonies that I had to do from what I was told in my inner guidance. There was only 3 things I had to do. The first one was to open another vortex for the ancient ones so they could come out.
Me dijeron que tenía que hacer 3 cosas y la primera era abrir un vórtice para que los que estaban abajo pudieran salir.
That was at Machu Picchu.
Esa fue en Machu Picchu.
And the second ceremony had to be performed on the island of the sun.
La segunda tenía que ser hecha en la isla del Sol,
which was the transfer of the power from the male to the female.
Que fue la transferencia de poder de lo masculino a lo femenino.
Now this energy was linked in there, and all this, everything was in place, but there had to be a ceremony from the people of the world to acknowledge this transfer from the male to the female.
Aunque a nivel energético esto ya se había hecho, tenía que haber personas del mundo que hicieran físicamente esta transferencia.
And a third ceremony had to do with but I didn't know where it was to take place, and that had to do with the Inca, the bringing back of the ancient Inca knowledge and wisdom into this time now, because they had certain knowledge and wisdom that we really need.
Y la tercera tenía que ver con, aunque no se sabía en dónde iba a ser, tenía que ver con traer todo el conocimiento, la sabiduría de los incas a este momento.
So the Incan shamans, as they told me later, sitting in a restaurant,
chamanes incas, como me lo dijeron después comiendo en un restaurante,
they didn't really know for sure, because they had a prophecy that there would be a group coming that would be from all over the world.
Ellos no lo sabían con
They weren't sure
certeza,
if we were the one or not. But
porque ellos tenían esta profecía de que iba a llegar un grupo que iba a estar formado por muchas personas del mundo, pero ellos no sabían si éramos nosotros.
they had to have 2 signs
Tenían que tener 2 señales.
that would come from nature. And so they wanted those signs when we first started, which was at Machu Picchu.
Ellos querían esas señales cuando nosotros comenzamos, que fue en Machu Picchu.
And so there were several, what he told me later, we only saw one of them, but there were many other ones that were in the mountains around Machu Picchu.
Nosotros solo vimos a uno de ellos, pero había varios que estaban alrededor de las montañas de Machu Picchu,
that had gone there and fasted for many days and were sitting in the mountains behind, watching our group on that day to see if we were who they thought we were.
Lo que hicieron todas estas personas que se colocaron en estos puntos era observar qué era lo que estábamos haciendo para ver si nosotros éramos esas personas que ellos estaban esperando.
And if it was true, that then they were going to lend their power to us and open to us. If it wasn't true, we would just be tourists and they would go their way.
Si éramos en verdad nosotros, entonces nos iban a entregar el poder que ellos podían entregarnos, y si no éramos, nos iban a considerar simplemente como turistas.
Same thing happened with the Navajo too at the end.
Lo mismo
So
pasó
I
con los
told that
Navajo.
story at the Mexican conference center,
Como lo dije en la conferencia en el World
That
Trade
was a pretty
Center de
powerful
México.
thing. I don't think I'll tell that right now. But the Navajo actually, they had to see a sign that no one could possibly control.
Y ellos, los Navajo, tenían que ver esta señal que nadie más pudiera controlar.
At any rate, as our group formed and we went into Machu Picchu,
Conforme se formó nuestro grupo y entramos a Machu Picchu,
at that very moment, a huge condor came down out of the sky and flew right over the top of us.
un enorme cóndor voló sobre nosotros y pasó.
As he told me later, shamans had not seen a condor in Machu Picchu for over 20 years.
Y como nos dijeron los chamanes, ellos no habían visto un cóndor en Machu Picchu en 20 años.
But that wasn't enough. There had to be 2 times.
Pero eso no era suficiente, tenía que pasar 2 veces.
And so they didn't move, they sat there and waited. And then later, after we did, a lot of people wanted to put their own energies into this and do things, and they did all those things. And then we had to do the first ceremony, which we went off to a place all by its side. This was many hours later, right?
Entonces ellos no se movieron de ahí para seguir observando, y entonces conforme las gentes estaban preparando lo que tenían que hacer, ellos se movieron hacia otro lugar en donde iban a hacerlo.
I don't remember how much, but it was hours later. We put the cloth down in 4 directions and began a ceremony that was to be a vortex to open up to, so that the ancient ones that were trapped in the earth could come into this plane and move with us, so that no one would be left behind.
Entonces lo que se hizo fue que se colocó la manta en el piso, se marcaron las 4 direcciones, y la intención de esta ceremonia era abrir ese vórtice para que los ancestros que estaban allá adentro pudieran salir a la superficie y avanzar junto con nosotros y que nadie fuera dejado atrás.
And right as we were about beginning that ceremony, either the same condor or another one came over the top of us, stopped, and just hovered right over the top of our ceremony site for 15, 20 seconds, and then went on. It's all on, somebody got it on video. I didn't even know what was happening because I'm looking at the ground.
Y justo cuando estábamos haciendo la ceremonia, no sé si haya sido el mismo cóndor o fue otro, pero uno pasó volando, se posó sobre la ceremonia, estuvo ahí volando unos 15 segundos y después se fue. Y hay alguien que incluso lo tiene en video. Yo no lo vi porque yo estaba enfocado acá.
Well, that did it. And one of the shamans that was elected came out of the mountains, came down and met with us, and then took us into that little cave, which he called a crystal cave because there were a few crystals in there, but it was a cave way down on the side of Machu Picchu, underneath here.
Entonces lo que sucedió es que esa fue como que la señal que esperaban, y entonces un chamán bajó y nos llevó a una pequeña cueva que está a un lado de Machu Picchu, que le llaman la cueva de cristal, no porque sea de cristal, tiene algunos cristales, y nos llevó ahí.
And did a ceremony, he performed the ceremony for us, where there was an exchange of eagle feather from me to a condor feather, where we exchanged from the 2 things.
Y él desarrolló una ceremonia para nosotros que consistió en que él nos entregó unas plumas de águila y nosotros unas de cóndor, al revés.
You have to understand, these things are usually never talked about and
Deben de
never
comprender que
discussed.
de estas cosas no se habla y nunca se discuten.
And it's hard for me to even really say these kind of things.
Es difícil para mí incluso decir este tipo de cosas.
But you need to know this stuff. You need to know where this leads and what this is about.
Pero ustedes necesitan conocer estas cosas, necesitan saber hacia dónde conducen.
So from that time forth, after he performed that ceremony, everywhere we went, the jungle opened up to us. I mean, there were people performing. I think I tried to count it. I think there were 7 indigenous ceremonies altogether.
A partir de ahí todo se abrió, la jungla se nos abrió, todas las personas se abrían y yo creo que a partir de ahí fueron como unas 7 ceremonias.
Where they just, one of them we went to, it was a female, what is a female shaman called?
Female shaman.
Female shaman.
Shamana.
Shaman, okay. Okay. She had built a special place just for us to come there, and no ceremony had ever been performed in there before.
Incluso, por ejemplo, una chamana construyó un lugar en donde nunca se había hecho una ceremonia y era solo para
The
nosotros.
place hadn't even been finished yet.
Y el lugar ni siquiera se había terminado.
And she did this just beautiful, beautiful ceremony. It was incredible.
Y ella hizo esta hermosa ceremonia, fue increíble.
But the one that's important, and I'm not going to go into all of those things anymore, but only go into what happened at Lake Titicaca and the final one.
Voy a hablar solo ya de lo que sucedió en el lago Titicaca y en la ceremonia final, aunque pasaron otras cosas.
At one point, we flew to Bolivia, and then took boats out to the island of the moon.
Nosotros volamos a Bolivia y de ahí tomamos unos botes que nos llevaron a la isla de la luna.
I had only arranged to go to the island of the sun because that's where I knew I had to do this ceremony, but it had been requested that we go to the island of the moon, and I had absolutely no idea why.
Yo ya tenía todo arreglado para Isla del Sol, porque yo creí que ahí es en donde se tenía que realizar la ceremonia, pero nos dijeron que fuéramos a la de la luna y yo no tenía ni la menor idea de por qué.
When we got to the island of the moon, this grandmother that was there requested that we do ceremony together.
Cuando llegamos a la Isla de la Luna, esta abuela nos sugirió que hiciéramos juntos la ceremonia.
But she was very afraid because of the people on her island, because this ceremony had never been performed in the presence of white people before ever.
Pero ella estaba muy preocupada por las personas de esa isla, porque esta ceremonia nunca había sido realizada en frente de hombres
And
blancos.
so she did it inside of a little house. And there wasn't enough room for everybody to get into this little house.
Así que la hizo dentro de una pequeña casa, pero no había suficiente espacio para todos.
So we all had to sit outside and take turns going in there in little groups to experience this.
Así que tuvimos que tomar turnos para entrar poco a poco y ser parte de esto.
And her love was just incredible. It was just amazing.
Su amor era increíble, era asombroso.
But the whole time I'm doing this, I didn't know why we were doing this.
Pero todo el tiempo que lo estábamos haciendo yo no sabía por qué lo estábamos haciendo.
Until finally, toward the very end, I asked the purpose, and when I was told the purpose, I actually started crying. I couldn't help it.
Hasta que finalmente pregunté el propósito y cuando supe el propósito me puse a llorar, no pude evitarlo.
Because the purpose was the transfer of power from the male to the female.
Porque el propósito era la transferencia del poder de lo masculino a lo femenino.
And that's what the ceremony was supposed to be on the island of the sun.
Y esa es la ceremonia que se supone que se tenía que hacer en la Isla del Sol.
And so we had come in from one direction by boat and then over there like that, did the ceremony, and then my heart was just blown open when I left there.
Entonces llegamos en bote a ese lugar, hicimos la ceremonia y cuando salimos mi corazón estaba muy abierto.
We were in about 5 or 6 boats to feed all the people, and we were going back, and as we were going to the island of the sun, which the 2 islands can see each other.
Y entonces eran como 5 botes para poder meter a todos, entonces de ahí nos fuimos en el bote hacia la Isla del Sol. Son 2 islas que se ven entre sí.
At that moment, I saw the violet ray and realized we're going to go right through where that crystal is that the woman from Peru had put down in between those 2 islands. We were going to pass right through that if we did. It was just like, it wasn't planned.
Lo que sucedió fue que de repente cuando vi esa luz violeta me acordé de que íbamos a pasar justo a través del cristal que la mujer de Perú había enterrado profundamente entre la isla del Sol y la isla de la Luna.
And when we approached the island of the sun, the driver said, "Where do you want to go?"
Cuando nos acercábamos a la isla del Sol, el conductor nos preguntó a dónde queríamos ir.
I don't know. I'd never been on the island of the sun before.
Yo no lo sé, nunca he estado en la isla del
I said,
Sol.
"Where's all the people?"
Le pregunté dónde está toda la
Over
gente.
here. I says, "Okay, we'll go over here."
Y me dijo, por aquí. Le dije, entonces vamos por allá.
So we went over to the left side of the island there, and it was just a bunch of rocks.
Nos
But
fuimos hacia este lado de la isla, el lado izquierdo, y lo único que había era un montón de piedras.
backed the boat up to where all these rocks were. They're just big rocks and stuff. Got up in there, and here's these stairs, these stone stairs coming out of the water, disappearing out of the water, coming out of the water, and going up the side of this hill.
Y entonces estacionamos ahí los botes donde estaban las piedras, y de pronto vi unas escaleras de piedra que venían desde abajo del agua, surgían de la superficie y subían por la ladera.
This led us up to this kind of a flat place up on top of this little hill.
Y que nos llevaban hacia un lugar plano arriba de la colina.
There was just no doubt. We were, in my heart, we were in exactly the right place, and we put down the thing.
En mi corazón no quedó duda de que este era el lugar
to begin
correcto,
the ceremonies.
así que pusimos la manta y empezamos las ceremonias.
I had no idea what I was doing.
Yo no tenía idea de lo que estaba haciendo.
All I knew is that we had to do the ceremony to transfer the power from the male to the female.
Solo sabía que teníamos que hacer esta ceremonia para transferir el poder de lo masculino a lo
So
femenino.
I asked for the oldest grandmother to sit in the east, and the next three oldest grandmothers to sit in the other three corners.
Entonces le pedí a esta abuela, la primera, que se sentara al este, y luego le pedí a otras dos abuelas que se sentaran en los otros dos
And then all
puntos,
the younger females to stand around them in a circle.
y que las demás mujeres se sentaran alrededor en un círculo.
And then all the males made a circle around them.
Y luego que todos los hombres hicieran un círculo alrededor de ellas.
And right as we were forming this thing happened, which was pretty weird.
Y justo cuando estábamos haciendo esto, sucedió esto que fue muy raro.
These two young women from Scotland and Switzerland? I thought it was Scotland and England. Somewhere, Scotland and somewhere over there. Come walking off this hill, walking down this ceremony, and said, "We've been waiting for you guys."
Y entonces de pronto sucede que dos mujeres, una escocesa y una inglesa, que estaban sentadas arriba de la colina, bajaron y nos dijeron, los estábamos esperando.
We've come all the way to do this ceremony.
Venimos hasta aquí para hacer esta
And they asked
ceremonia.
permission to be part of the ceremony.
Así que pidieron permiso para ser parte.
I didn't even know where the ceremony was going to be.
Yo ni siquiera sabía en dónde iba a ser la ceremonia.
I figured anybody that did that, they need to be in that ceremony.
Y pensé, cualquier persona que haya podido llegar ahí tiene que estar en la ceremonia.
Two more people from Europe joined the ceremony there.
Así que se integraron dos personas más a la ceremonia.
I had my drum that I'd had for 20-something years. It was a Taos Pueblo drum.
Yo tenía este tambor que lo tenía hacía como 20 años, que era del
I'm
pueblo
just
Taos.
ad-libbing this thing. At this point, we just put sage around it to purify, to clean.
Pusimos salvia para purificar y limpiar,
And I drummed around, actually clockwise in a circle.
y toqué el tambor en el círculo a favor de las manecillas del reloj.
And then, in essence, asked the men to give the spiritual power to the females so that they can have the power to begin this new era of
Y lo que
time.
hice fue pedirle a los hombres que le entregaran el poder espiritual a las mujeres para que ellas pudieran tenerlo en esta nueva etapa o ciclo.
It was really hard for three of them.
Fue verdaderamente muy difícil
It was
para
like
tres de
pulling
ellos.
teeth. They
It
were
was
like
like what?
pulling teeth. They just like,
Es como si les estuvieran sacando un diente.
they just couldn't do it.
No podían hacerlo.
Finally, they were, all right.
Finalmente dijeron, bueno, está bien.
We all turned over that energy, and then when that happened, I gave my drum to the grandmother, which is a symbol of the drumming power of the male to the female.
Entonces finalmente todos entregaron este poder y lo que yo hice fue entregarle este tambor a la abuela, que significa también entregar el poder a una mujer.
And the grandmother finished the ceremony.
Y la abuela fue la que terminó la ceremonia.
And then many things happened after that. We left.
Y después sucedieron muchas cosas después de eso cuando nos fuimos.
But the one that really got me,
Pero la que realmente me llegó,
the very, very end of all of this. I mean, we went to the Nazca lines, the Papa lines, we did a lot of things and stuff, but the very end, the last ceremony that was done, was something that was added onto this trip at the very end.
hicimos muchas cosas después de esto, fuimos a las líneas Nazca, fuimos a hacer varias cosas, pero lo que realmente fue fuerte o le llegó fue una última ceremonia.
And a new Inca site had been discovered, just discovered.
En un lugar inca que apenas acaba de descubrirse.
And we were directed to go there to do this ceremony.
Fuimos dirigidos para hacer allí esa ceremonia.
But again, nobody knew what the ceremony was about but me.
Pero nadie más sabía de esta ceremonia aparte de mí.
I've been keeping it to myself.
Yo lo mantuve para mí.
And that information was to be given to the grandmother at the very end.
Esta información se le tenía que dar a la abuela al final.
Because this would be the first ceremony of the new cycle where the female would begin the first ceremony, the first female ceremony of the cycle.
Porque la abuela tenía que conducir la ceremonia, la primera ceremonia después de la transmisión de este poder, y esta ceremonia la tenían que hacer las mujeres.
And the story is, first of all, we had to drive 20 miles through desert and sand.
Tuvimos que viajar 20 millas
there,
a través
right?
del desierto y la
there.
arena.
Was anybody there?
¿Alguien de ustedes estuvo ahí?
Nobody was there?
No, en esa ceremonia. ¿Dónde fue la ceremonia?
Aquí tengo.
En un lugar en el desierto.
Well, they had just found an Inca city.
Acababan de encontrar una ciudad inca.
And they had just opened the tip, just the tip,
Y solo habían abierto la punta, solo la punta,
of one pyramid.
de una pirámide.
And underneath these sands was a huge, huge, massive Incan city.
Pero debajo de esas arenas había una ciudad inca enorme, enorme, muy grande.
And as we were, the night before we had dinner, this Inca priest and his young little boy came up to us. He's all in his feathers and his whole thing, walking into a restaurant.
La noche anterior cenamos con un sacerdote inca que venía con su niño y venía vestido con las plumas y todo, y así entró a un restaurante.
And asked permission if he could come and be part of our ceremony.
Y pidió permiso para ser parte de esta ceremonia.
He's just this really beautiful person, and
Una persona realmente hermosa.
and his little son, which is basically his apprentice,
Y su pequeño hijo, que es básicamente su aprendiz,
he comes up to me, he sits in my lap, and he kisses me.
se sentó en mi regazo, me besó y todo.
He says, "Yeah, of course, you come to pick the thing." Well, on the way there, again, I've never been to the site, I don't know what it is. He tells me the history and the story.
Entonces, en el camino hacia ese lugar, él me cuenta esta historia.
He says, there's a river that goes down, and we're following along the river, and this is all just desert. It looks like you're out in Egypt or somewhere. It's just sand.
Es pura arena, todo está muerto, pero hay un río que corre a lo largo de por donde nosotros íbamos.
We're driving past ancient Inca cemeteries where they had buried themselves and things.
Pasamos a través de cementerios incas antiguos,
And on the other side of the river is the Nazca lines.
Y del otro lado del río están las líneas Nazca.
Now, to understand this story, the Nazca lines, on one level of understanding them, is nothing but rocks that have been removed from the surface to expose another color of dirt underneath. And so the Nazca lines are only this, let's say, a quarter-inch deep, if that.
Para que puedan entender qué es esto, las líneas Nazca es como si hubieran removido ciertas piedras para dejar al descubierto una tierra de otro color abajo, pero en realidad las líneas tienen como 1 pulgada de profundidad nada más.
And the city starts 100 meters on the other side of this river.
Y la ciudad está como a 100 metros de este río.
So you have the Nazca lines on one side of the river and this huge, massive city. I mean, this will take them probably 20 years to undo this or more.
Entonces, de un lado del río tienen las líneas Nazca y del otro esta enorme ciudad que les va a tomar como 20 años sacar de ahí.
And he said that this was the city, I forgot what it was called. It's a city where the wisdom of the Incas was embodied.
Y él me dijo que en estas ciudades en donde se encarnó realmente la sabiduría de los incas.
And this was the time when the conquistadors were coming. It was before they had come.
Esto fue antes de que llegaran los conquistadores.
But the shamans knew that they were coming.
Pero los chamanes sabían que ya venían.
And so they prayed, and what they were told was that they were to bury the city.
Entonces ellos oraron y lo que se les dijo fue que tenían que enterrar esa ciudad.
And so they prayed to the wind,
Oraron al viento.
and the wind came, and this huge storm that came for many, 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 many days, and buried the entire city completely and in 60 feet more of sand.
Entonces empezó esta enorme tormenta que venía de muchos, muchos lados, y lo que hizo fue enterrar la ciudad, pero no solo eso, sino como todavía 60 pies más.
But then, just on the other side of the river, not one grain of sand fell.
Pero del otro lado del río no cayó ni un granito de arena.
None of those lines were covered. Nothing happened. Only on this side of the river.
Ni siquiera se tapó una sola línea, solamente de este lado del río.
And the whole prayer was that it would be buried
Tenía que ser
during the
enterrada
dark time of humanity.
durante la época oscura de la humanidad.
But in the future, it would be reopened, and the wisdom of the Incas would be remembered and brought forth. And that's what this ceremony was for.
Entonces, en un tiempo futuro, la idea era que esta ciudad se reabriera y pudiera nuevamente conocerse esta sabiduría.
We arrived there,
Y
and
para eso era la ceremonia.
we climb up this mountain to get up on top. You're climbing 500 feet or more up on top of the sand dunes.
Entonces nos subimos por las dunas de arena hasta esta montaña, unos 500 pies.
And here you could see this pyramid beside it, and just the tip, these people working, there's the one, just the tip of the, and it looked like it was brand new stones because the sand just completely sealed it.
Y
And-
entonces desde ahí arriba podíamos ver esta enorme pirámide de la cual solo sobresalía la punta, y las piedras están muy bien conservadas porque la arena como que lo selló.
And we were standing on top of another huge pyramid directly underneath us.
Y nosotros estábamos arriba de otra enorme pirámide que estaba debajo de
And then you
nosotros.
look out through the thing and you could see, once you knew what it was, there was pyramids everywhere.
Y desde ahí donde estábamos, ya que uno sabe lo que está ahí, podíamos ver cómo en realidad había pirámides por todos lados.
And so the grandmother set up the first on top of that huge pyramid in view of this other one just being exposed. And the females the males just sat outside the circle, and
Entonces la abuela que inició la ceremonia estábamos en esta pirámide, se veía la otra y estaban los hombres en un círculo alrededor.
the females began the ceremony for the opening of the ancient Inca wisdom.
Las mujeres abrieron la ceremonia para el retorno de la sabiduría inca.
And just as they began, another condor came right over the top.
Y justo cuando empezaron, otro cóndor voló por encima.
It's amazing.
Es asombroso,
It's absolutely incredible.
realmente increíble.
And so, what's about to happen
Entonces, ¿qué es lo que va a suceder?
is that the spiritual light of the world has now been transferred into Peru and Chile.
La luz espiritual del mundo ya ha sido transferida hacia Perú y Chile.
There are going to be women spiritual teachers.
Va a haber mujeres, maestras espirituales,
That are going to lead the world back into the heart,
que van a conducir al mundo de vuelta al corazón,
and the way of the heart. And
al camino del corazón.
This is going to happen.
Y esto va a suceder.
This is not a maybe.
No es un quizás.
This is happening now.
Eso está sucediendo ahora.
So then, the next thing that happens after this,
Lo siguiente que pasa después de esto,
I get a call from Switzerland.
me llaman de Suiza,
Who doesn't know any of this?
que no sabe nada de esto.
His name is Shin Shiva.
Su nombre es Shinshiva.
He is a Hindu Kundalini master,
Él es un maestro Kundalini de la India,
and who has huge temples and following in India.
tiene templos grandes en Bali,
Asked
en la
me
India,
if I would have a meeting with him in Switzerland.
y me pregunta si me puedo reunir con él en Suiza.
My inner angel said yes, but didn't say why. It just said go.
Y los ángeles me dijeron que sí, pero no me dijeron por qué, y nada más me dijeron que fuera.
So I go to Switzerland and I meet him in his home. It's this beautiful house.
Voy a Suiza y me lo encuentro en su casa hermosa.
He's an older man. He's, I don't know, maybe 80, 75, 80, long white beard, wears long white clothes.
Es un hombre mayor, de unos 70 años, más o menos, con una barba blanca larga.
And he's like being really nice to me.
Y él realmente fue muy, muy amable conmigo.
So we have a dinner and everything else like this. And then finally I said to him, I says, why am I here?
Entonces estábamos cenando y de repente le dije, bueno, ¿y por qué estoy aquí?
He says, well, it's kind of hard to explain, but we want you to do something.
Me dijo, bueno, es difícil de explicar, pero queremos que hagas algo.
And I said, what is that? And he says, well, we have to go into Peru and Chile and Mexico and other places that you decide, because we want to bring the leaders of the spiritual leaders from Tibet and India to do ceremony there.
Queremos ir a ciertas partes como México, Perú, Bolivia, porque ciertos líderes espirituales necesitan realizar ceremonias ahí, líderes de la India.
To acknowledge to the world that the spiritual light of the world has now been transferred and is completed from there to here.
Para que quede ya muy claro cómo esta luz espiritual ha sido transferida desde allá hasta acá.
And you know, I have all the means to do that. I have all the people that can do that. So I said, no problem. And he says he wants it all to be free.
Y como yo tengo todos los contactos con todas las personas, le dije, claro que sí, no hay problema, porque él quería que todo esto fuera gratis.
And so we're now just waiting for him to give us the names of all the spiritual teachers of all the different disciplines and their bios, who they are.
Entonces estamos esperando que él nos dé los nombres de todos estos líderes espirituales
And there are exact times and where he wants to go, and we're going to do it.
Y también los tiempos exactos en los que quiere que esto se haga y lo vamos a hacer.
Now, he already came to Mexico City once. Just after he did that, then he came to Mexico City one time to tell Mexico that this is going to happen.
Después de esto, él ya vino a México, estuvo en México una vez y vino a decirle a México que esto es lo que está pasando.
And so, I don't know, it just doesn't seem to stop. The new president of Chile, Michelle,
Y esto parece no detenerse. La nueva presidenta de Chile, Michelle,
she is the person that invited me to Chile to do the first Flower of Life there.
ella es la persona que me invitó a Chile a hacer el primer taller de la Flor de la Vida.
She's been through the Flower of Life. She knows the whole thing.
Ella ha tomado la Flor de la Vida, conoce todo esto.
And I guess you know her story. She's an amazing person, how she survived all the political stuff that's happened with her.
Creo que conocen su historia, cómo sobrevivió a todo el asunto político en el que se vio involucrada.
But she's completely in tune with all of this. She knows this stuff.
Ella está completamente en sintonía con todo esto, ya sabe de todo esto.
And so, even even politically, Chile is aligned with this new energy.
Incluso a nivel político ella está alineada con esta nueva energía.
So now we have to see what happens in Peru,
Y ahora tenemos que ver qué sucede en Perú,
because it could happen that a female be made president.
porque
in Peru.
puede suceder que haya una mujer presidente en Perú.
And it's beginning to happen everywhere. I
Está
mean,
comenzando a pasar en todos lados.
Germany, just for the first time in their history, just had a female president ever.
En Alemania también puede ser la primera vez que haya una mujer
You could
presidente.
very well see this happen in the United States this next time.
Y también la próxima vez podría ser que esto sucediera.
And so, the females, you have to understand, something is happening within you.
Mujeres tienen que comprender que algo está sucediendo dentro de
And
ustedes.
between you and Mother Earth,
Y entre ustedes
and
y la
between
Madre Tierra.
the cycles of time, of the way they are unfolding right now,
Y también entre ustedes y los ciclos del tiempo como se están desenvolviendo ahora.
that this is the time. This is not just any moment in history.
Este es el tiempo, no es solo un momento más en la historia.
The outer world is going to go through an incredible chaotic change.
El mundo externo va a pasar a través de un cambio muy caótico.
And the inner spiritual world is also going to change.
Y el mundo espiritual interno también va a cambiar.
And this is a great time to be alive.
Este es un momento maravilloso para estar vivos.
So do you understand?
¿Comprenden?
There are no accidents in this world. Everything is just happens according to the will of God.
No hay accidentes en este mundo, todo sucede de acuerdo a la voluntad de Dios.
What we need to remember now is what this is,
Lo que
what your heart
necesitamos
is.
recordar ahora es qué es esto, qué es su corazón.
Every star, every planet, every person, everything in creation was created inside of your heart.
Cada estrella, cada planeta, cada persona, todo lo que fue creado desde tu corazón.
It is what we think the world is not what it is.
Lo que
We are looking at
nosotros-
an illusion.
Lo que nosotros creemos que es el mundo no es, lo que estamos viendo es una ilusión.
There's absolutely nothing there.
No hay absolutamente nada allí.
There are no stars and planets. There is no Earth.
No hay estrellas y planetas, no hay tierra.
None of it exists.
Nada de eso existe.
It doesn't exist here anyway.
No existe aquí de cualquier forma.
This is nothing but a projection from your Merkaba.
Esto no es nada más que una
Not any
proyección
different than
de
if
su
you
Merkaba.
were in a theater and they were shining a movie on the screen.
No es nada diferente a una película proyectada en una
Only
pantalla,
this is a really good one.
aunque esta es una muy buena,
Very sophisticated that took
muy sofisticada.
billions of years to understand and make, but it is a very real holographic projection from something where the truth really is.
Es un holograma perfectamente proyectado que proviene de el origen donde realmente está.
And as you begin to understand what the truth really is, it's very simple.
Y si comienzan a comprender cuál es la verdad, es algo muy simple.
And all these outer problems that look so hard to solve,
Y estos problemas externos que parecen tan difíciles de resolver
are so easy.
son muy fáciles.
It isn't to change the world from to the way it is. It doesn't require anything but a child dreaming a dream.
Todo lo que se necesita para cambiar el mundo como es solo un niño soñando un sueño.
It's really easy,
Es muy fácil,
but we're kind of locked in this way of perceiving the world.
pero estamos atrapados en esta forma de percibir el mundo.
And so my job now over the next day and next tomorrow is to get you into and perceive from the ancient way of the heart.
Y lo que yo tengo que hacer ahora, lo que queda del día y mañana, es llevarlos a esta manera antigua de percibir desde el corazón.
Now we're all at different stages of growth, which is appropriate.
Todos estamos en diferentes niveles de crecimiento, lo que es apropiado.
Some of you will go directly in, have no problem.
Algunos de ustedes van a ir directamente hacia adentro sin ningún problema.
Others of you will understand it, but you won't be able to get in there right now.
Algunos de ustedes lo van a comprender, pero no van a ser capaces de entrar en este momento.
Maybe next month,
Tal vez el mes que entra,
maybe next year.
tal vez el año que entra.
It doesn't make any difference. It's all part of the cosmic DNA of the way things are unfolding.
Y realmente no importa, es parte del ADN cósmico, cómo se desenvuelven las cosas.
You will remember exactly when you're supposed to remember.
Para recordarlo exactamente cuando se supone que deben recordarlo.
And you can't make it, you can't force it to happen.
No pueden forzarlo a suceder,
Can't make it happen any faster.
no pueden tampoco hacer que
And
suceda
so
más
there's no
rápido.
reason to feel like if you happen to be one of those that don't get in right now, you don't have to feel like you failed. You're not failing. It's just all a matter of timing.
Así que si alguno de ustedes no puede entrar, no tienen que sentir que fracasaron o fallaron, es simplemente cuestión de tiempo.
If all the women in this room were about to give babies, they probably wouldn't happen at the same exact minute.
Si todas las mujeres de esta habitación fueran a tener bebés, probablemente no todas los tendrían en el mismo momento.
They over different times. And so,
Lunchtime.
oh, it's perfect. Okay.
¿Qué va a pasar con Colombia? A ver.
What is going to happen with Colombia?
Colombia? What's going to happen with Colombia? I don't know, but I really believe that Colombia is going to play a big role in this.
No lo sé, pero yo siento que Colombia va a jugar un papel importante en todo esto.
Peru is going to probably play the most important role in northern Chile and parts of Argentina.
Perú, el norte de Chile y partes de Argentina son los que siento que van a jugar el papel más importante.
Ecuador has more work to do right now, but they will become part later.
Ecuador tiene todavía que hacer mucho trabajo, pero se va a volver parte de esto más tarde.
Brazil and Venezuela are already beginning to unfold this.
Brasil y Venezuela ya están empezando a desplegar esto.
And Paraguay and Uruguay and down in there are still working to open their hearts.
Paraguay y
And
Uruguay
they will.
todavía están trabajando en abrir sus corazones y lo van a hacer.
Colombia has a huge role in this, huge.
Pero Colombia tiene un papel muy grande en esto, grande.
I mean, the Colombian people are, they're beautiful, and there's so much that, but they're at war right now.
Los colombianos son hermosos, pero pues están en guerra en este momento.
And even the Maya, even the Kogi and the Mamos that are there are now at war with this whole energy. They're killing them too now.
Incluso los Kogi y los Mama que están en esta zona están en guerra, los están matando.
And there's even fighting amongst themselves.
Incluso creo que se están peleando entre ellos.
But now that this energy has gone through and certain things are beginning to come into place, and it's going to get better.
Pero ahora que esta energía ya atravesó, las cosas se están poniendo en su lugar y todo tiende a mejorar.
And it's going to go all the way from mostly it's going to be, the United States is going to be one of the last places to wake up.
Estados Unidos va a ser uno de los últimos lugares en despertar.
But Mexico has played such an important role in all of this because
México ha jugado un papel muy importante en este
because they are
juego.
centered around the heart of the world. Even though the Kogi see their mountain, the heart of the world.
Porque están localizados alrededor del corazón del mundo, aunque los Kogi dicen que su montaña es el corazón del mundo.
The actual, from my way of seeing, and a lot of other people, the actual heart of this planet is accessed through the Mount. I can never say the name of it.
Popocatépetl.
Yeah, Popo, whatever it is.
Desde mi punto de vista, el lugar a través del cual se accesa el corazón en este planeta es el volcán Popocatépetl.
And when the time is right, you're going to be assisted greatly by the plasma beings.
Y en el momento adecuado van a ser tremendamente ayudados por los seres de plasma.
But it all started here. This is what helped get everything going. It was the Mayans and it was the Mexican people.
Pero todo comenzó aquí, fueron los mayas y fueron los mexicanos.
I'm going to say this one more time. I said it in Mexico City, but most of you don't maybe realize how fast the Mexican people are waking up.
Voy a decir esto, pero algunos tal vez no lo oyeron en la conferencia, pero tal vez no se han dado cuenta de lo rápido que están despertando los mexicanos.
But you can see this in just what I'm about to say. When I went to Chichen Itza in 1985 to look at the spring equinox, that's when at that moment when the sun goes down, the shadow forms that connects with that stone head of the snake below, and that told the Mayans when the spring equinox was.
Esto que les voy a decir tal vez los haga darse cuenta de esto. En 1985 que yo fui a ver el equinoccio de primavera en Chichen Itza, en donde la sombra se forma como una serpiente que llega hasta una piedra que tiene cabeza de serpiente.
They put up a little bleacher, and there were about, I have to estimate, but about 100 people that were there to watch this.
Había como una pequeña tarima y había como 100 personas que estaban ahí para ver eso.
And of the Mexican people out of that, maybe 20.
Y de mexicanos eran como 20.
And that's all it was.
Y era todo.
I was then invited back 10 years later in 1995 by the Mayan people to do ceremony at that very place, at that very time.
En 1995, 10 años después, fui invitado por los mayas para hacer una ceremonia en ese lugar en el mismo momento.
You know how many people were there?
¿Saben cuántos habían?
42,000 people.
42,000 personas.
And they were almost all Mexican.
Y casi todos eran mexicanos.
Then I was invited back in 2001 or 2, I don't know when it was,
Luego
recently.
fui invitado en 2001, 2002,
And the estimates
recientemente.
then were 80,000 people.
Y el estimado fue como de 80,000
Almost
personas.
completely Mexican.
Casi completamente mexicanos.
You guys are just...
Ustedes están...
You're just completely, and you're becoming aware of everything, and you have influenced all of Latin America.
Ustedes están volviendo conscientes de todo y han estado influyendo mucho en Latinoamérica.
You have done just an incredible service to the world.
Han hecho un increíble servicio al
And
mundo.
I see this happening in 2 places, Mexico and in Russia.
Y yo veo que esto está sucediendo en dos lugares,
And
México y Rusia.
Russia's doing the same thing you are.
Y Rusia está haciendo lo mismo que ustedes.
Russia is just exploding with spiritual awakeness. It's just incredible.
Está explotando Rusia de conciencia espiritual.
And they have directly affected Germany and all of Europe.
Y directamente han afectado a Alemania y a toda Europa.
Germany is right behind Russia. For Europe, Germany is just exploding with spiritual awakening.
Pero Alemania está más retrasado que Rusia, aunque también está explotando de conciencia
And
espiritual.
now it's beginning to happen in Japan.
Y ahora está empezando a suceder en Japón.
And I can't tell you what's going on because it's secret right now, but what's going on in Japan is, oh God, it's amazing.
No les puedo decir en este momento porque es un secreto lo que está sucediendo en Japón.
And so, but there's going to be a time when people from all over South America are going to really thank you for what you've done.
Pero va a llegar un momento en el que muchas personas en Sudamérica realmente les van a agradecer por lo que ustedes han hecho.
Because it was so many, and it was really the Mayans. I mean, the Mayans have been central in this awakening. So have the Hopi, and there's been others. And so
Los mayas realmente han tenido mucho que ver en este despertar, como que lo han sostenido, y también los Hopi.
But if the Mayans had not lived, and if they had not been there and been able to do that, this energy may have still been blocked, and the whole world could have died.
Pero si los mayas no hubieran estado aquí, no hubieran ayudado en ese proceso para pasar la energía, tal vez el mundo no estaría aquí.
Without this spiritual awakening happening on Earth, what's about to come in terms of the Earth changes that are about to occur would engulf us.
Que si no fuera por este despertar espiritual que se está dando en el mundo, con todo lo que va a suceder, todo el caos que va a suceder ambiental y demás, simplemente nos tragaría.
You don't have to be afraid of these changes. This is just Mother Earth kind of moving her back around a little bit.
No tienen que asustarse por estos cambios, es simplemente la Madre Tierra moviendo un poquito la espalda.
And she knows right where you are.
Y sabe perfectamente en dónde están.
She knows who is to stay here and who is to go. And
ella sabe perfectamente quién se tiene que quedar y quién se tiene que ir.
You could watch a 1,000-foot tidal wave coming at you and don't worry about it.
Ustedes podrían ver una ola de muchísimos metros viniendo hacia ustedes y no preocuparse.
And there will be those.
Y habrá quienes lo hagan.
You know the one that just happened in that tsunami and everybody freaked out. It was a 20 to 40-foot height tsunami.
¿Se acuerdan
You saw
del
the damage?
tsunami y que midió de 20 a 40 pies de alto?
Do you know that there was a tsunami 3 years ago
¿Y saben que hubo un tsunami hace 3 años?
that was 1,700 feet high?
Que fue
Yeah.
1,700 pies de alto.
3 years ago, 1,700 feet high.
De 1,700 pies de alto.
It was in Alaska, and it went into an area where there was no humans.
Fue en Alaska y entró dentro de un área en donde no había humanos.
It was just an unbelievable high wall of water.
Era una pared de agua increíblemente alta.
And it went in there, and because not one person died and not one building was lost, they didn't even talk about it.
Pero como no se murió ni una sola persona ni se derribó ningún edificio, pues nunca nadie habló de eso.
So there's going to be a lot of things coming, things you can't even hardly believe, but
van a pasar cosas que, bueno, ni
you
siquiera las
don't
van a
have to be
creer.
worried at all.
Pero ustedes no tienen que
You don't have to be worried about a thing.
preocuparse
Wherever you are
en
going to
absoluto.
be, you're going to be fine.
En donde sea que estén van a estar bien.
Okay, I did it. I told you the story.
Ya lo hice, les conté la historia.
Thank you.
I got my job done.
Classic.